considered at today's meeting were posted on the RTSD website on Wednesday, May 30th, 2018. The RTSD website is also accessible by links from both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County official government sites. In addition, on May 30th, 2018, the meeting agenda was posted on the bulletin board located in the City Hall, first floor, 555 South 10th Street. A copy of the agenda is also available at the entrance to this room. One copy of the meeting agenda and all materials being considered today are located on the dais, and complete copies of these materials are on file at the RTSD office at 949 West Pond Street, Suite 200. And with that, we will begin with the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which were available online and also emailed to you. Is there approval of the minutes from March 6th?
So moved.
Second?
Any comments or corrections? Amy, if you call the roll, please.
Munson?
I will abstain.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes.
Wilton?
Yes.
Motion passes, 4 yeses with 1 abstention. Item 4, reportment of statement of financial activity. Ms. Thal.
Good morning, Liz Thanel with Lancaster County Budget and Fiscal Department. You have your statement of financial activity in front of you as of May 24th. As of May 24th, your tax revenues equal $5,238,031, which puts you just 1% over your budget of $5.2 million for the year. Your investment and miscellaneous income totals $132,678. $96,681 of that is interest. There's another $46,100 of miscellaneous income, which is city reimbursement on the 33rd and Cornhusker project. So your total receipts are $5,370,709. On the disbursements, commissions, you've paid $97,185 so far. Operating costs, $60,190. Construction projects total $10,348,123 for a total expenditure $10,505,497 so far this year. Your ending cash balance as of May 24th was $548,212, with another $14,017,274 in investments, for a total fund balance of $14,565,486.
There's also a listing available of how that $4 million is invested.
Yeah, there's about 5.54 million in CDs. If you total that up, and there's about 8.5 million in money markets. So it's about a 40-60 split.
Liz, could you go over again why the investment interest income and miscellaneous income is over a bit? And because the budget says 60,000, and then the actuals to date are about 132,000.
Right. Well, 46,000 of it is a return from the city that I did not budget for. It was not planned at that time.
Okay.
And when I write the budget, 60,000 of interest is based on us spending the entire budget of 12.4 million.
Okay.
And interest rates have gone up quite a bit. Our money market has actually doubled since January of 2018, and our CDs are up 40% from a year ago.
Oh,
the rates.
that's great.
So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to accept the statement of financial activity?
So moved.
Second?
Call the roll, please.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes.
Wilton?
Yes.
Amundson?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 5, report of current budget status.
Morning, Madam Chair, board members, Roger Feigert representing the RTSD. Page 1 of the attachment that was online with item number 5 is the current budget and the future budget. As I've told you in the past, my favorite sheet or report that we have. Just quickly, the FY18 operating budget was $85,500. We spent a little over $60,000. Probably the largest next expenditure would be the second half of the superintendent services paying for my portion. I just signed off on another invoice this morning for just a little under $23,000, so that will bring that nearly to 100%. And I would expect we'll have a few more expenditures with our attorney as they continue to review contracts and help us with some of those. So there would be a little bit more expenditure there. The support and clerical services are over the budgeted amount a little bit, and a lot of that has to do with working closely with Amy, and she's continued to clean up process and get things written down and prepared for the future when some of us won't be around, and cleaning up files and paperwork. So any questions on the operating expenses? If not, just quickly highlights. In the crossing area, I would expect perhaps another invoice. I was hoping the invoice would get in to pay for the replacement of the OPPD crossing on 84th Street with OPPD in the city. I've not seen that invoice. That might get carried over. And in the rest of the current year, I probably would only point out we'll have another invoice on 33rd and BNSF crossing, 33rd and Cornhusker. Chris will give a bit of a project update. Probably the two projects that I have a question on further down would be the OPPD crossing at Pine Lake and the Jamaica Trail North. There was $100,000 in there for Pine Lake for this year and $200,000 for Jamaica. And I had budgeted accordingly, so I simply would indicate to the board, I don't know if those invoices will actually get to us from the city, and if they don't, I would simply amend, or I would simply add that money to next year's budget when you have a final budget in front of you in September. The big expenditure was the $10 million that was made to the city for the South Beltway. So we're pretty good.
Am I remembering correctly that Sarah asked us to pay a year in advance to help kickstart the funding for that?
Yeah. Originally, we had a total of $600,000 split, $200 this year, $200 next year, $200 the following year, and they asked that the last two 200s all be put into next year. So when I talk about the proposed budget, if you look at that sheet, we're showing $400,000 in FY19, and if the 200 doesn't get spent, I'll just carry that over, and the 4 will become 6.
Other questions regarding current budget, Todd?
When are we scheduled to make the second payment of $10 million for the South Beltway?
By September of this coming year. So there is $10 million in next year's budget for that second payment.
Other questions? We'll move to item 6, consideration of fiscal year 18-19 budget and CIP.
So on the same sheet at the far right hand in the dark blue is a draft budget, realizing basically these numbers are the same as what you saw in March. The official and formal budget for your approval, it goes to the state auditor, will be in front of you in September when we have the exact valuation and know where we are there. But for the operating budget, I was proposing increasing that from 85.5 to 89.7. There's an increase, a slight increase, about 3% for the audit and budget preparation. that's underway. I also have been doing quite a bit of cleanup with contracts and paperwork with Mr. Kudalek in our legal firm. So I increased that from 7,500 to 85 proposed. And I increased the labor services about 2,500 to continue to cover just any increased administrative costs and cleanup costs. In the proposed construction projects for railroad crossings, would propose to continue that typical $300,000 split between the city at $250 and the county at $500. Just carrying over $10,000 for OPPD and 91st and Yankee Hill in case there's any lingering charges that would come back in on that project from the railroad. Carrying forward the Salt Creek underpass, $50,000. Continuing our typical $100,000 for miscellaneous engineering and emergency and safety. We've got $2.5 million in proposed for 33rd and Cornhusker. The next proposed contract that would include some NEPA and some preliminary engineering that we would start working on, and Chris will fill you in more on that, but the goal would be perhaps to have that contract ready to come to the board at the December meeting. $10 million, Todd, is there for the South Beltway. Would propose carrying $25,000 for Southwest Lincoln feasibility. Don't have a contract in place, we're just holding and waiting to see what happens. Hastings sub-relocation feasibility project. The $14,000 that's left has been expended. We'll have a report, should have a report for a conclusion of that study as we go on into the summer, but I don't have an absolute where do we go from here from the railroad because I've not heard back. So what I'm proposing is that we put $100,000 in that budget and that we amend our current contract with Olson's and go from a lump sum or to what I would simply call a cost plus. Work that we need them to do would be done at a standard rate, estimated and brought to myself, would have to be approved by myself and the chair. But at this point, we really don't know what additional work we're going to have to do. So we'd have a budget amount there. We'd amend the contract to say that they could do work on a time and materials basis based upon approval and signature of the chair and the executive director as we go into the upcoming year. And then as I mentioned, both OPPD at Pine Lake, next year's budget is $500,000. If the $100,000 in the current year doesn't get expended, I would bring back a budget in September of $600,000. And for Jamaica Trail North, if the $200 doesn't get expended, I would add and amend the $400 to $600 for the next year. Woodstruck Crossing.
Hold for question.
Oh,
I
please.
just have a follow-up for the Hastings sub-relocation feasibility. Is there a limit or a cap that you're putting on the expenditures, with that 100,000? Is it in that 100,000?
Well, the 100,000 is the budget, and we couldn't go over that without coming back to the board and amending the budget.
Okay, so
And I'm currently working on a draft contract that simply the chair and I would agree to a maximum on each one of those activities as we'd ask them to do the work. But it could never go more than 100,000
for all the additional activities if
for
they're
this
needed?
fiscal year. Yes.
Okay.
And we really don't have any timeline when we hear back from the railroad.
No, I would hope to hear some more from them this summer. There's a meeting in Denver in June, and we'll try to meet with them as well. But it continues to be a typical railroad process. Takes a while.
2 items at the bottom of the
Right. And Those would generally be revenue neutral if we move them over. It simply would be an under expenditure this year. The cash stays in the account. You're rebudgeting for the next year. So that would show an estimated total expenditures for next year of $14,406,700.
Address the North 48th underpass.
Oh, good point. I think I mentioned that in March, but just as a reminder, the city's long-range transportation plan shows a proposed improvement of 48th Street, generally from Adams to Superior Street. And that includes a section that goes underneath the BNSF tracks just south of Cornhusker Highway. That project currently, I think, just resides outside of the city's 6-year plan, but is going to start moving it in. And one of the things that will be key in determining that project and what it is what can you do, what do you have to do with the underpass of 48th Street. So the proposal here was to partner with Public Works Engineering, and in this upcoming year, hire an engineer to analyze what are the roadway needs, what are the widths, can you perhaps build a new roadway underneath the existing railroad bridge? We're going to have to reconstruct the railroad bridge and get a better sense of what that project would be and what it would cost before the project moves in further into the CIP. So trying to pre-plan, and again, knowing sometimes how long a process it is to work with the railroad, have a better sense of what that project would involve with the railroad before we get there.
Draft budget. As Roger said, we'll be approving it at our meeting in September. Any questions at this
The only
time?
question I have, it goes back to agenda item number 5, the report of the current budget status.
Okay.
Do we need to adopt that?
The number 5, no.
We
That's
don't, okay.
just giving you a
Excellent.
report on it. We
Okay.
do ask for an approval or consideration or a revision to number 6.
Okay, so I will move that we approve the proposed budget and CIP.
Second?
Call the roll, please.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, consideration of additional 1% levy.
1% lid authority.
Road authority.
And just a reminder, this is really a future insurance policy activity. This is not a request to increase the budget by 1%. It simply allows, should there be a lid issue in the future, that with the approval here, the board is authorizing the ability to add 1% to that lid authority if needed. And it also, in the future, would require an additional vote from the board. So all you're doing here is providing an insurance policy that doesn't cost you anything, but it's there if you need it. If you need it in the future and you haven't approved the 1%, you can't back up at that point and increase it. So just trying to look ahead a little bit for that.
We did receive a briefing on this from Dennis Meyer,
Yes.
the county budget fiscal director, at our previous meeting. Cindy?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what the current unused lid authority is. Do you know?
I don't know. But I could go, and I don't know that Dennis has that. Typically, that has not been an issue for the RTSD and a problem, but
I would point out, I think Dennis does know that, because,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we know
I
what
think
it
we
is for the
file
county.
it. I mean, we have to file it, so.
I did visit with him before the meeting, and he is available for questions if you'd like. I can certainly go get him.
No, I'm fine, thank you. I know, I looked at it last year. I just didn't know what it was this year, so.
Roger, are you looking for a motion?
Yes.
I move we approve a 1% lid authority.
Second?
Additional comments or questions? Call the roll, please.
Yes.
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 Great.
Unanimously. Moving
Awesome.
on to item 8, consideration of letter request for 2018 tax roll.
Okay. I would simply remind the board, currently, We are setting at 2.2217. And I think we've kind of run the numbers in the CIP to continue that, but certainly the board is open to suggest the continue. We're looking for a recommendation that we would send to the county board for their consideration to set the levy in August for September.
Todd?
What's the current levy that we adopted for this fiscal year?
2.2217.
And you're proposing an increase?
No.
No.
A level, okay. Thanks.
I move that we put forward a recommended 2.2217 as the levy request for 2018 tax rolls.
Is there a
Second.
Okay, motion second. Comments or questions? Call the roll, please. Yes.
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 Just motoring through the agenda.
Yes, we are.
Rolling through.
We are
For
on
a
schedule.
train.
We are ahead of schedule and under budget today. So, okay.
Great.
Good news all around.
Yes. Item number 9 is the consideration of the FY 18-19 legal contract with Crosby Gunsel. You did have a copy of that with you, and Bill William Kudlek is here. I would simply indicate again my appreciation and respect for Bill and the firm and the work that they've done. We've done a lot with contracts, cleaning up language. His recommendations and support is outstanding. This contract represents a continuation of the fees and costs from last year. It has a $600 annual retainer for coming to the meetings, and then an hourly rate, I might say a very good hourly rate that's continued the same as last year, $155 for partners and $100 for the associates. And primarily it stays the same, but Bill's here in case you've got any questions, and my recommendation is to ask the board to continue that contract.
I simply just want to, maintaining brevity here on this meeting, certainly want to appreciate, show our appreciation as a firm of our longstanding involvement with the RTSC. I appreciate the opportunity to work with Roger, certainly, and the board. As Roger indicated, no changes to this year's contract from last year. We review this on an annual basis, and certainly our firm is comfortable going forward with respect to that. So we certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue our relationship.
So move that we continue the legal contract with Crosby and Gunsel.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Carries unanimously. Report of project and crossing updates.
Okay, I'd ask Chris Humphrey to come forward and give us an update on our 33rd and Cornhuskers, our biggest current project activity. So, Chris?
Good morning, Chris Humphrey. I'm the RTSD project manager for the 33rd and Cornhusker project. Basically, since the last board meeting, we've been concentrating on developing the sub-area plan. With that, we've been working with our advisory group, and our big event was just held May 9th through 11th, and that was the 3-day charrette that we worked with the advisory group, some technical people that work for the city, and to try to help develop that sub-area plan. And with that 3-day charrette, we had the public open house, which was held the evening of May 10th, I believe, a Wednesday night there, and there was about 100 people in attendance. So we had a good turnout. We've received a lot of comments, and so Olson Associates has been taking those comments and further developing the sub-area plan. They have also been working on the transportation solutions. We just had a brainstorming session last week and coming up with additional transportation solutions other than we're in that planning environmental linkages study that we had done. And all of those transportation solutions will meet the basic needs of the project, those being like the safety, mobility, connectivity of the area. But in addition, it would help support the sub-area plan and the land use needs in there. So moving forward these next 3 months, We'll continue to refine the sub-area plan. We'll continue to develop and refine those transportation solutions, finding some that seam together. And then, as Roger mentioned, we are working with the Nebraska Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, and we'll start to develop that scope of services for that environmental contract so that we can seamlessly roll through this planning stage and then in 2019 get into the environmental phase of the project. So with that, we'll have some preliminary engineering work that will also be done, but at the end of this year, our goal is to have the sub-area plan complete, and with that, a preferred transportation alignment that we would further analyze in our environmental document. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, not a question so much as a comment. Thank you very much for all the work that you've done on this, and for the citizens of Lincoln that have come forward to participate on the advisory council have been wonderful, and also for the great turnout at open houses. I think making those available and getting out the notice has been very important, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, was it clear with all the folks that attended the open house on the timeline? I know that some comments that we heard at our last meeting that people think, oh, great, it's moving forward, this is good news. But again, could you just review briefly what the projected timeline would be? Because we have a few obstacles to go through first.
Sure. And I just want to point out, too, that all of the sketches that were done at the public open house, those are available on the website, which is 33rdcornhusker.com. They're very colorful. You can tell that they're done by planners and not engineers. So those are done. So our goal is to have the completed sub-area plan complete at the end of this year and ready for adoption. And then in 2019, we would go into the environmental phase. We call that NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And that will take about 3 years to complete, that we're estimating. It really depends once we get involved with the environmental and how many studies, how in depth that we will need to get, how many transportation alignments that we have to do. It's looking like we'll do an EIS, which is kind of a higher level, but there are some commitments with different agencies in there that will help us keep on that schedule. So that's just part of our ongoing discussions with the Nebraska Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. So after that NEPA process is complete, the environmental process is complete, then we will move into final design, and that would take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And then we move into right-of-way acquisition. There will likely be some relocations in this project, so hopefully there can be a little bit of overlap with final design as far as starting on appraisals early, but that would probably take another 2 years. And then after that, we can let the contract or contracts out for construction. So we're still a ways out, but we do have that end date in mind, and we are really trying to work hard right now to keep that end date.
And this tentative schedule is available on the website as well?
Correct.
Todd, any questions?
Chris, I had a question about, so in attending the open house, there were additional drawings that had different, I guess, different designs than ever we had originally seen. So can you kind of speak to the process, how some of those new designs would be incorporated in the work we've already done?
Yep, so this is a real iterative process, and when we got done with the Pell study, it checked all the boxes as far as what we needed for the transportation solution, but there was one question that it couldn't answer, and that was, will these solutions, transportation solutions, meet the land use needs in the future? And so that's why we incorporated the sub-area plan into it. So with the sub-area plan, it's basically a footprint of how this area will look as private sector redevelops or develops the area. And so they're taking a look at all the different land uses. And with that, they need to have some infrastructure that would support those land uses. So there was a lot of drawings that were on the board at the open house, and they weren't really engineered, I should say. And so after the open house, last week, there was a whole group of people in the room, planners and engineers, and we took a look at all of those concepts. We discussed each of them and said, does this meet the needs of transportation? Does it meet the needs of the future land use? If it did not, then we kind of set it aside, and we just kind of systematically look to see what the best transportation system, looking not only 10, 15 years out, but even the longer term, 50, 100 years, because whatever we build is going to support the needs of Northeast Lincoln for a very long time. So it's kind of, we're looking at three different things at the same time. So it's a very complex area in terms of the skew and the number of roadways that are all coming together, existing businesses that are there. We're cognizant of everything. There's a lot of stuff happening in that area, and we really want to do a good job planning and making sure that we will support this area of Lincoln for a very long time.
Well, and so in that process like you undertook last week, would the public be able to have information to the outcome? Because some of those designs were very popular, but I think they weren't actually practical. And so that's kind of where we run the risk of not managing expectations
Right.
accordingly.
And we'll
that,
have,
Yeah, that kind of led to Jane's point where it kind of gets people excited.
yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to have that information readily available so that when the public does come forward and, brings up this drawing that they saw, that they know what, kind of what happened to it.
Yes, definitely. And all of our process, and especially in the environmental process, everything is just basically going to be an open book. And so right now we're developing the document that kind of summarizes the open house, and that will be available on the internet or on the website fairly soon. We're planning on having another open house meeting in August, maybe September-ish, so this fall sometime. And by that time, we'll be able to take what we learned at the sub-area plan and show the public what we have been working on in terms of those solutions.
So one final question, and it kind of goes back to the whole process. So when you identify the revised alternatives to the project, I mean, will there be multiple ones? Or, I mean, because it gets more complicated once you start going through the environmental process, because you could, I mean, is it possible to take multiple designs through that process?
Yeah, so at the end of this year, we'll have one preferred alternative. That will be the alternative that's shown with the sub-area plan. But basically, everything that meets the transportation, the RTSD's project, what we'll be constructing, anything that meets the purpose and need for that project, which is safety, increase the mobility, reduce the delays, anything that meets that project need will have to be analyzed further in the NEPA process. But the next tier of our analyzation that will happen during that environmental process, there'll also be specific goals, such as compatibility with the sub-area plan. So some of those transportation alternatives, even though they will all meet the purpose and need, some of them won't be as compatible with the sub-area plan, and so it's just a matter of documenting why those alternatives were removed from consideration. It's a lot of documentation, and at the end, once we get to the final alignment that you'll be able to go back and see all the different concepts that were developed, the reasons why they were moved forward or the reasons why they weren't moved forward.
Right. No, and that's, I think, in my mind, in the future, if we make a determination on a final design and it's different than what we originally proposed, starting that regulatory process all over again can be a nightmare.
Yes, yeah, and that's why we have kind of a timeline, and everything's documented of the reason why we ultimately will end up with the transportation solution that we have.
Question for you or for Rick, but do you want to talk a little bit about the charrette going on this week
Yep.
involving the advisory committee?
Yep, thank you. I forgot about that. So this Wednesday and Thursday, in addition to the sub-area plan, we also have a corridor enhancement plan. And this Wednesday and Thursday, we will be meeting with project stakeholders along that corridor enhancement area, which is from about 11th Street to 56th Street, or L55X. And so basically that corridor enhancement plan talks a lot about aesthetics of the area, and we've gotten a lot of great responses. So I'm hoping that we have a really good turnout. That'll be advisory group members, the stakeholders, and then some technical members from the city that will attend that.
All right, thank you very much.
All right,
for
thank
that
you.
In-depth update. Appreciate it.
Okay. I think the RTSD is fortunate to have Chris Humphrey as our project manager. She's been very thorough. She's very knowledgeable of the public process as well as the federal transportation process, and helping us slowly keep winnowing things down and getting to where we need. So appreciate her assistance greatly. Just a couple of other things on projects I mentioned a little bit. The city is currently working on Pine Lake Road from east of 56th Street over to Highway 2. That includes the crossing of the OPPD tracks east of there. I know they are in a draft agreement mode with OPPD, and should yet this summer at some point have a signed agreement in there that speaks to the cost of putting in a new railroad crossing there, and easements and right-of-way rights. And then they would be invoicing the city after that agreement is done. And that, I doubt, probably happens yet in June, probably is in July and August. Jamaica Trail North, I did talk with the project manager this morning, and they are finalizing the contract with their consultant for final design. That should be going through the city process in the upcoming couple of weeks. If they don't get that completed in an invoice to me, again, as I said, in June, would simply carry that over and we'd make that expenditure in July. West Woodstruck, the crossing there, I would say we're kind of on hold. We currently don't seem to have a safety problem. We'd been waiting on the railroad to get back to the county engineer and myself on a preferred alternative. They seem to be kind of slow, and could be an expensive project, so I've budgeted a little bit of money to continue to work on that if things come up. Otherwise, we're kind of on hold. If circumstances change out there and the county engineer has some issues or feel we need to do something, we have some money in the budget to resurrect that discussion and move it forward. Reminding ourselves we're not just a Lincoln big city part. The village of Roca was resurfacing one of their streets this summer, and it abuts the BNSF tracks, and they were having some issues in trying to get a permit at a reasonable price, and the RTSD stepped in and helped them work with BNSF to get a construction permit and some easements at a much more reasonable fee that would be more commensurate with their size.
Share those figures. I thought it was amazing that you were able to step in and negotiate on behalf of the village of Roca and save them thousands of dollars.
The standard permit and the process used suggested that Roca should pay them somewhere around $18,000 or $19,000 for a storm sewer permit. Roca's entire road budget for the entire year is about $30,000. They couldn't possibly afford that. But with assistance from the public affairs director from BNSF, we were able to get that recommended down to $500 for the permit. So feel pretty good about that. That just speaks to the need sometimes that you've got to know people and build a relationship and work through that for them. I might say JEO was the consultant for Roca, and they did a good job of helping on that as well. And then I did mention that The Hastings sub is if kind of in that holding pattern, and we'll be adjusting and coming up with a new contract. Whether or not we'll have a full report at the September board meeting, I don't know. I'm hoping to make some progress and get some better insight from BNSF on how receptive they are to this project being a reality and a potential of moving ahead. Didn't have anything specific. There's still some crossing replacements and work out there that needs to be done. Still working with BNSF for trying to replace the crossings along Highway 2 at 27th Street and at 48th Street. I would remind us the city has a federal aid project at 48th and Highway 2 replacing the traffic signal, and we need to make sure that a crossing repair doesn't interfere and upset the federal process there in their environmental clearance that they've got. I have at this point no set schedule for Y Street for the OL&B there by their concrete plant. They continue to patch and repair as complaints come in, so we're trying to take care of that. Still some work that needs to be done on crossings on Northwest 12th with OPPD. And then anything else that comes up. We did have an incident in last week, I believe. The arms came down at 56th and Old Cheney, and my understanding is traffic was backed up a long ways. You witnessed it. It sometimes, you know, I think in this case perhaps it was considered a lightning strike and the electronics were not working, but it did take them a while to dispatch a crew to get there. I noticed we had citizens helping holding up the gate arms so cars could drive through. Fortunately, no one was hurt. But any questions board members might have about projects or crossings?
And maybe this has been on here and I just have never noticed it, but for 70th and Burlington Northern, up north, just south of Cornhusker Highway, in 25, 26, and 26, 27, there's $1 million. I mean, is that something, I mean, is that just, I guess you could speak to that.
Try to think ahead. We try to plan ahead with both the city and the county, and as we think about the BNSF corridor that starts downtown and goes all the way through, if we're successful, and I'm sure we will be at 33rd and Cornhusker and Adams, and 70th Street is the next at-grade crossing that probably deserves some consideration. The city, Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan calls for grade separations with arterial streets and the Class 1 railroads. So that is simply placeholder money to have out there in the future to start thinking about and maybe working on alternatives for grade separation or road configuration changes.
All right, if there are no other updates, we'll take non-agenda items. Or is there anyone wishing to make public comment here today? As they rush to the podium. We have a couple.
Seeing none, I have just two quick items, just an update for the board. The city did approve and executed my contract for May of 2018 through April of 2019. So thank you for the support and the privilege to continue to serve the district. And then I will also be attending the annual summer meeting for the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, serving on the Railroad Highway Technical Committee. That's in Denver, June 19th through the 22nd. So I'll be out there for that.
Okay, movie adjourned.
Second.
And before we call the roll, I just want to remind everyone the next meeting will be held on Tuesday, September 11th at 11 a.m. Amy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.